Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Tuesday, it's November 19th. Today is day 410. I'm back in Amman, Jordan, crossed the King Hussein Bridge from Beit Sahur today, and wanted to give you an update on the news from the last 24 hours. Use this as fodder for prayer as we continue in our advocacy efforts. Updates from Lebanon. The U.S. envoy to the Middle East, it was reported that Hochstein would not be going to Lebanon, but that was a false report. So he did arrive in Lebanon. There were a number of security incidents while he was there throughout the day. The Middle East news source Al Akhbar reported the use of phosphorus artillery shelling, Israeli advancement in addition to Hezbollah rocket fire throughout the day and numerous other security incidents. Hochstein met with the parliament speaker Barry in Lebanon and said after the meeting that we worked to narrow the gaps in terms of a Hezbollah-Israeli ceasefire. The meeting was very constructive. We're committed to doing everything we can to work with Lebanon and Israel to end the conflict. He also met with Prime Minister Najib Mikati and the Foreign Minister Abdullah Bu Habib and U.S. Ambassador Lisa Johnson. Mikati said after the meeting, the government's priority is to stop the fire and aggression against Lebanon, to preserve Lebanese sovereignty over all Lebanese territory, and everything that achieves this goal has top priority. Mikati also said the government's main concern is the rapid return of the displaced from their villages. You'll recall that when I was in Beirut in January, at that point, there were already about 100,000 people displaced. And since then, reports indicate that there are 1 million or more people throughout Lebanon who have been displaced because of bombardments throughout the state. Other priorities include stopping, quote, the Israeli war of extermination and the senseless destruction of Lebanese towns, end quote. Reports from Lebanon indicate that the bombing has been worse than the 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel. The Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sheikh Naim Qassem, was supposed to give a speech today. That did not happen and has been postponed to a later date that is yet to be determined. All the while, UNICEF reported today that more than 200 children have been killed and 1,100 wounded in Lebanon in the past 2 months. According to other Middle East news sources, these are official Israeli sources. 1,000 Israeli soldiers have been injured just since the start of the ground operation in South Lebanon, and 11 soldiers were injured in South Lebanon in battles within the last 24 hours. Lebanese civilians continue to be killed every day. Again, Tuesday, November 19th, a citizen and his 5-year-old child were killed today in an Israeli airstrike that targeted his home in South Lebanon. Yesterday, on the 18th of November, 35 people were killed, 143 people were wounded. Those are the reports from yesterday, recounting the previous 24 hours. As of yesterday, the total number killed in Lebanon has been 3,516 people, and the total number wounded is 14,929 since October of last year. An update in terms of negotiation and ceasefire agreements related to Gaza. The Qatari mediation efforts, it says that they have been suspended due to a lack of seriousness of both parties, referring specifically to Hamas and Israel. Doha will not accept being exploited for political purposes. Hamas and their negotiating team leaders are not currently in Doha. They're moving between different capitals. You heard it was reported previously that they were moving to Turkey. That's been denied. The Qatari foreign minister's spokesperson said if Hamas's political office is closed, it will be announced by the Qatari foreign minister and not by any other means. He also said Doha is ready to resume negotiations when the sides are ready to take the deal and the talks more seriously. The Egyptians also called for reconsideration of a temporary 2- or 3-day humanitarian truce referring to Gaza. an idea that Israel continues to reject. Cairo believes the refusal is tied to Israel's desire for a truce in Gaza to be a part of a broader agreement facilitated jointly by officials from the current Biden administration and the Trump administration. So one of the key things that we're hearing is that the Biden administration is not going to move forward in this lame duck session between now and January 20th without any tacit or formal approval from the new Trump administration. And we're seeing already that the Trump officials are starting to be briefed and receive security briefings even now. So this is the handover to the new government, which means that our hopes that the Biden administration might try to accomplish something significant in these next few months, that could be counter to what might be on the Trump agenda is highly, highly unlikely. Sources revealed that extended meetings in recent days concluded in Washington, that extended meetings in recent days concluded that Washington, referring specifically to the Biden administration, is, quote, incapable of exerting genuine pressure on Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli security officials have not provided any clear assessments of the security situation in Gaza, either for the present or during the proposed periods of calm. So that's an update about ceasefire negotiations. In terms of Jerusalem and the West Bank, local Arabic news in Jerusalem, Al-Quds al-Bawasala, said Israeli forces have ongoing operations to demolish a mosque in an East Jerusalem neighborhood. And the newspaper Al-Quds, this is a direct quote, said more than 140 children from Jerusalem will soon lose the mosque where they've been learning the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet for the last 20 years, end quote. There's been an ongoing raid in the occupied West Bank in Jenin over the last couple of days, and it was reported that 3 Palestinians were killed today, the 19th of November, according to a military source reporting to the Times of Israel. In Gaza, the ongoing military campaign in North Gaza has continued to bomb homes, target civilians, destroy infrastructure, as well as attacks on medical personnel and rescue teams. The Washington Post reported that organized gangs stealing Gaza aid supplies are operating freely in areas that are controlled by the Israeli military, according to aid officials and witnesses. An internal UN memo concluded that the gangs may be benefiting from passive, if not active, benevolence or protection from the Israeli Defense Forces. That was reported by the Washington Post. They also said that relief organizations accused Israel of enabling theft and attacks on aid convoys, contradicting claims about Hamas's interference in humanitarian efforts. Security forces in Gaza arrested gang members, targeted aid envoys, and killed about 20 of them yesterday on the 18th. The Gaza death toll is now approaching 44,000 people. Over the weekend, there were 70 people killed. On Sunday, 50 people killed yesterday. 110 wounded in the last 24 hours. Today is the 410th day of war in Gaza. The death toll is 43,972 people. At least 10,000 people continue to be missing, buried under the rubble. Lest we think things have slowed down, it is so critical that we know this update. I'm going to read you an update about just some of the things that are happening, and I'm going to use the language that's reported from Gaza. The term martyr is used. Remember that this means that someone's life was not lost in vain. Think about the term, may their memory be a blessing. Think about the way Christians use the word witness, that these people were created in the image of God. These are often children or women. This is from Al-Yam news agency that's monitoring the developments in Gaza. This is from their reports from today, the 410th day, just over the last 24 hours. In the North Gaza Strip, the Israeli military demolished residential buildings in the Jabalia camp with tanks advancing in Beit Lahia. Mahmoud Salim al-Madoun was martyred after being shot by a quadcopter drone in Beit Lahia. One person was killed and others injured when a drone dropped an explosive near a school in Beit Lahia housing displaced individuals. The forces of Israel committed 2 massacres in the last 24 hours, resulting in 30 martyrs or deaths. In Gaza City, one person was killed or martyred following the shelling of a gathering in Al Nasser neighborhood. Final reports confirmed the death of 12 members of the Abu Riyala family on Al Jala Street, with search efforts halted as 3 individuals remain missing under the rubble. This is only in North Gaza and Gaza City. I haven't even talked about Central Gaza. Several people injured with artillery shelling in the Al Barej camp and the Al Nusrat camp. Sahar Shada Jabr al-Nuriya was killed in an Israeli airstrike targeting a group west of the al-Nurasat camp. An infant from the Abu Warda family was killed following artillery shelling on the new camp west of al-Nusrat. More and more names I could continue to read. 4 martyrs were reported after the shelling of a marketplace south of al-Nusrat camp, with another 8 injuries. In the South Gaza Strip, the Israeli army renewed its destructions of homes in Rafah, continued artillery shelling and tank fire in the eastern Khan Yunis area. Explosions were frequently heard due to the demolition of residential blocks west of Rafah, while Israeli aircraft launched a strike on the Al-Shabura camp in the city center. 4 individuals were killed in a different airstrike on Rafah, including a woman killed by tank fire west of the city. I wanted to read that because 410 days in, I don't want these numbers to just become numbers. Every single incident, may we be reminded that this is going on day after day, so we don't stop in our advocacy efforts. Yesterday, Safa Awad, a Palestinian citizen in Israel, of the state of Israel, a 50-year-old teacher and mother of 4, was killed by a Hezbollah rocket near Haifa. As rocket fire from Hezbollah continued to bombard Israel, 10 other people were wounded, including a 4-year-old Israeli boy. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday that last month's Israeli strikes on Iran facilities damaged a specific component of Iran's nuclear program. And UN Security Council members yesterday called for a significant increase to aid in Gaza, with the U.S. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield saying Washington is closely watching. Aren't we glad that Washington is watching? Norway will ask the UN General Assembly to request the International Court of Justice to rule, clarifying whether or not Israel is violating international law by preventing the UN, international humanitarian organization, and states from providing humanitarian assistance to Palestinians. In the U.S., 20 White House staffers criticized the Biden administration for failing to follow through on their demands that aid reach Gaza. The letter was seen by Politico. I'd encourage you to read that article. The U.S. yesterday warned Turkey against hosting Hamas leadership. The U.S. Senate will vote tomorrow on legislation filed by Bernie Sanders that would block some arms sales to Israel. The legislation is not expected to pass. I was very, very concerned to see that a group that includes, I was very, very encouraged. I was so encouraged to see that a group that includes a number of prominent rabbis, 2,000, I believe, or more, in the coalition in the United States, engaged in human rights. These rabbis, it's a group that's called Trua, that are calling for the U.S. to withhold offensive arms from Israel because of the atrocities in Gaza. Their chief executive, Rabbi Jill Jacobs, told religious news services offensive weapons are keeping the war going, causing horrific damage to Palestinians. It does not keep Israelis safe, and it certainly does not get hostages back. One piece of U.S. law is that countries can't block humanitarian aid, Jacobs said. There shouldn't be a double standard for Israel. J Street is another Jewish lobby group. It's calling for the withholding of certain weapons from Israel. Both Trua and J Street are groups that initially supported Israel's right to defend itself. I'm sure that they still do. But they're now calling for the withholding of certain offensive weapons, which is hugely significant. That Jewish groups, J Street considers itself pro-Israel, pro-justice. And a sign that things are turning, that they're calling for the withholding of offensive weapons or some weapons from Israel. And so my prayer and my hope is that peace would come quickly. Might God continue to go before us for the sake of all of his creation and all of humanity, for the sake of life. In the name of Christ, amen.